Okay, so hello everyone. Today it's our pleasure to welcome Sushant Sareen, a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, leading think tank in India, with extensive expertise in South Asian geopolitics. Mr. Sareen has spent years analyzing and shaping conversations around India-Pakistan relations and also looking into the complex dynamics with China and the evolving security landscape in the region. His insights are especially valuable in these times of heightened geopolitical tension, and his insights are especially valuable providing an in-depth and balanced perspective on issues all around. So, welcome, Mr. Sareen. Um,
Thanks for.
yeah. So just to dive in, Pakistan recently launched the Azam-e-Ishtikam operation as a sign of commitment to stability to China in their counter-terrorism measures. So what makes this particular operation different from, let's say, the security measures taken before? And could this lead to a more increased Chinese influence in the Pakistan's domestic security policy?
So look, they did announce the Azme Istikam, but then they said that this is not an operation, this is more of a policy. They themselves confused on whether this is actually an operation or a policy or a strategy, what it is. Because they had to double back after announcing this. And the reason for that is that the reaction from the ground was very negative. Because a lot of people thought that there would be a repeat of the kind of operations which had taken place in the past, which had created mass displacement of people. Uh, Internally displaced people became, and many of them have still not been rehabilitated. They've not been able to go back. So at least in the Pashtun areas, there was a lot of pushback on this particular policy. Plus, at the political level, they did not get any support. So I think they had to double back on this particular announcement, and then they said that okay, fine, uh, we will continue to carry out intelligence-based operations, which apparently were already being carried out. So how was this particular operation any different from the one which was already undergoing? But I suppose part of it was a bit of politicking from the army chief, who wanted to have his own stamp on a project, an operation. His predecessor had Raddul Fasad before him. This guy, Rahil Sharif, had Zarbe Az. So maybe he wanted his own stamp. That was one reason. Second was, of course, uh, to signal to the Chinese that the Pakistanis are actually now going to carry out yet another operation to get rid of the terror networks which are operating inside Pakistan. But because now they had to back down, uh, I that particular plot seems to have collapsed. And the Chinese have not actually taken very well to it,
Mm,
because the Chinese have put security now at the front and center of whatever investments or whatever projects they're carrying out in Pakistan. So as a result, the Chinese have been now demanding that not only Pakistan clean up its act, get its act together, but even more importantly, the Chinese have proposed some kind of a joint security mechanism.
mm,
Now, what exactly is going to be the framework of this joint security mechanism? Nobody is very clear. Will it mean simply intelligence cooperation and intelligence sharing, but which I assume much of it is already happening? Does it mean that the Chinese will have boots on the ground and monitor the security apparatus in Pakistan? Does it mean that Chinese private security companies will be tasked with security of Chinese personnel and Chinese projects? So there is not a whole lot of clarity on that. Um, Apparently, the Pakistanis balked when the Chinese were proposing this, but it seems that there could be some backroom negotiations going on as to what exactly this joint security mechanism will entail. So that is where we are at right
yeah. And just staying on China. So there was the incident at the Karachi airport where Chinese nationals were killed. And it was basically an indication of maybe a more complicated China-Pakistan relation now that we, as you mentioned. So, how do you think this would directly affect the China-Pakistan economic corridor? And how would deploying this very special security division really reassure Beijing of Pakistan's commitment as this reliable economic partner moving
See,
forward?
Pakistan's assurances, are kind of falling flat because after every incident, the Pakistanis assure the Chinese the earth, the moon, the sky, everything, until the next incident happens. So I don't think the Chinese are quite convinced by Pakistani assurances. Secondly, the CPEC is really not going anywhere, unless, of course, you take MOUs seriously, and there's a plethora of those. But in actual terms, in terms of what is the actual amount of money that the Chinese are investing now, number one. Number two, what are the new projects that they are undertaking? There is virtually nothing. So, in a sense, the China-Pakistan economic corridor has come to a some kind of a standstill for now, at least. Its economic viability is also now in question because the Pakistanis owe the Chinese a lot of money and they're not able to pay it back. They're trying to renegotiate some of their loans, even as they're asking for more financing for newer projects. So I don't see how they're going to be able to break out of this logjam. Then there is the entire question of the security division. So now the security division um, has been there for many years now. If I remember correctly, it was around maybe 2014, 2015, thereabouts, almost 10 years back, that the Pakistanis announced first one division, then they raised it to two division, which they were raising solely for the protection of China-Pakistan economic corridor and the Chinese um, workers who were employed on these projects. But clearly, if the security division, special security division, which they had formed, was working, then you would not have and was effective. You would not have the spate of incidents you have had. The other problem is that the uh, it is not possible to cover every inch of territory, every project, every Chinese personnel who's working in Pakistan. It's humanly impossible.
Hmm.
And the problem is not so much that somebody will be targeted, but the question is where the targeting will happen and at what time. And there are multiple groups who have an interest in targeting Chinese. Uh, so you have the Baloch freedom fighters, you have the Pashtun Taliban, you have other radical Islamist groups. Um, you have all kinds of people who are involved in these actions. So how many do you control? How do you control them? And will two division of troops be enough to ensure security? I think um, it's quite clear that that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, and a very notable point on the growing insurgency as well. And just to stick on that, there has been the rise of the TTP in recent times and other insurgent groups as well, as you mentioned. And there, I just wanted a comment on Pakistan's internal security dynamics shifting and evolving, maybe in a sense, and that impact correlating to not just China, but India as well. And both India and China have security concerns when it comes to Pakistani-based military. So, is there any form of evolution, any shift in Pakistani security dynamics, and should China and India be concerned on that front?
I think we have our own concerns. In the case of India, whatever is coming our way is state-sponsored terrorism. In the case of China, it is mostly non-state actors who are very active against the Chinese involvement in Pakistan, which they see as furthering what they call the Pakistani colonization project. So I think they see the Chinese as collaborators of the Pakistanis, and therefore they are targeting them. They also see the Chinese as the money bags propping up the Pakistani
Mm.
state. So they find that problematic. And so the threats which are coming to India and China are coming from different directions. And which is why what our security concerns will be are very different from what the Chinese security concerns are going to be. Secondly, as far as the internal security dynamics inside Pakistan are concerned, uh, I I really think things are going from bad to worse because uh, despite all the crackdowns, the brutality, the kind of clampdowns which have taken place, the restrictions on freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, very draconian measures that the Pakistani state has taken, it does not really seem to have reduced the levels of violence. In fact, the levels of violence are increasing by the day. And the direction from which the violence is coming is also not a single source. There are multiple sources from which violence is now visiting Pakistan. So the Pakistanis don't seem to have really got a handle over the situation, and their default position is to uh, use the hammer approach, just go with everything in their arsenal, and it's not a very sophisticated politico military kind of an approach. Even if it is a politico military approach, then it's more military than political. That they think politics is that you plant a puppet of the Pakistani military and that is the political solution. It doesn't quite work that way. So I think they are at their wits' end. Plus, I think to a great extent, the Pakistan army is so involved in the political management of the country because of the kind of political disarray and disaffection that we are seeing. That in the sense that they have not been able to marshal the kind of national unity and purpose which is required to be fighting. What almost amounts to or is becoming increasingly an existential threat in terms of what is coming their way from Afghanistan, what is happening in Balochistan, and the general unsettled conditions that exist in the border states, but also inside the country. So I think the internal security environment is rather negative by all standards.
And this does, so this volatility, if we can use that word for Pakistan's military dynamics, I feel like it raises the question of regional stability as well. As you said, there are threats coming from everywhere, essentially. And just on the note of moving forward, and as we know that India's role in growing in the international stage in general, and we saw that we may be entering potentially an era of maturity. And how would you feel that, given that India recently visited Pakistan for the SCO and also in the post G20 relations in general, how is Pakistan's approach to this relation with India evolving? Are they now a bit more tame towards India as a growing power?
No, I don't. I think there is a certain recognition among some circles in Pakistan about India's growing profile. The growing economic gap between Pakistan and India, and virtually everything else. So I think there is a recognition of that particular factor. Now, when you are faced with that reality, there are two ways you react. One is that you reconcile to it and you say, okay, fine, if things have reached such a pass, then the smart thing to do would be to reach out and move towards some degree of normalization with India. The dumb thing would be to say that, okay, fine, let us see how we can pare down the advantage of India by doubling down on, the failed policy of the last 25, 30 years, which is using proxy warfare, non-state actors, which are basically, it's a misnomer to call them non-state actors because they are backed by the Pakistani state. So they are state auxiliaries, if you will. Um, so there are these two ways, and I suspect that in the case of India, it seems to be that they are leaning in the direction of the latter. So while they profess the former, that you'll have the occasional statements that somebody expressing that we want to trade with India, we want to have good ties with India. Of course, every time those statements come, there's a caveat attached to it that provided you turn back the clock on the constitutional reforms in Jammu and Kashmir, etc., etc., which basically means that you don't want any forward movement. Uh, so that is one side of it, and the second side of it is the current spike that we are seeing in terrorism inside Jammu and Kashmir. Um, it's not, it hasn't quite crossed the threshold, but I think it's something that we cannot afford to ignore, or something that we can afford to be complacent about. So there are these two strands which are operating in parallel as far as the Pakistani approach to India is concerned. And I would say that we haven't really seen anything to suggest that there has been any significant shift in the basic paradigm of Pakistan's policy on India. So what it means is that they are probably going to follow that, or they think they can follow that parallel track approach, where you try and engage with India at some level, but you continue to stoke the fires in India at another level.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that strategy is going to be very sellable.
Thank you so much, sir. As we wrap up, of course, I'd like to thank you for your time and for your invaluable insights into the challenges. And I think some old and some new evolving intricacies in regional stability that we have discussed, and South Asian security in general. I think it offers a very crucial perspective into understanding really the dynamics of South Asia. And we definitely look forward to having you back, sir. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.